Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we've got a whole stack of sources that they really show the big conflict happening in the world right now.
They really do.
You have this incredibly fast-moving technology on one side, and then it's just hitting a wall of economic and, government friction.
It's a fantastic mix of materials you've sent over, and that's our job, right? To connect the dots. You can't just look at tech or just finance. You have to see how one is shaping the other.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're going to focus on three main areas. First, the huge race going on in AI infrastructure.
Right.
Then we'll look at some massive changes in the financial markets. And finally, we'll touch on some key signals from the global economy and government rules.
Absolutely. The key thing to understand is the why behind the headlines. So let's start with where all the money and the future seem to be crashing together, the AI infrastructure war.
Let's do it. We're starting with a huge investment that really shows a big change in how people are even thinking about AI. The headline here is, NVIDIA has invested $2 billion in Synopsys Inc. to use AI in every part of chip design.
And this is such a strategic move. The $2 billion, which gives NVIDIA about a 2.6% stake, is almost, not the most important part.
Really, $2 billion seems like a lot.
It is, but the purpose is the bigger story. They want to shift AI from being something that just runs on a chip to being the main tool that you use to actually design the chip in the first place.
Okay, so that's the big idea here. It's a total flip. We're talking about automating the design process itself.
Exactly. They call it electronic design automation, or EDA. The goal is revolutionary, really. They want to use AI to make the whole process faster and cheaper, cutting out all the expensive and slow trial and error stuff.
You mean like building physical prototypes and testing them?
Exactly. Imagine how complicated the chips are for cars or robots or medical equipment. Using AI to design them could cut the development time from, say, years down to just months.
But doesn't that create a huge risk? I mean, if the AI that's designing the chip makes some kind of basic mistake, the cost would be massive, right? Is this a smart risk or just a big gamble?
I'd say it's a calculated necessity. The competition is so intense that they have to take this kind of risk. The alternative is falling behind for good. And it connects to this bigger financial pressure on these tech giants. They're all racing for computing power, for talent, and they're often taking on debt to pay for it all.
Which leads us perfectly to our next story. This one shows just how much pressure is on the top players. So the news is, competition in AI is getting intense, causing OpenAI to declare a code red and Apple to change its AI leadership.
Right, and this tells us that the high costs of building AI are now a problem even for the biggest companies. That code red at OpenAI isn't just about new features, it's about the intense competition and, the financial squeeze.
And they're pausing their ChatGPT ad rollout.
Reportedly, yes. And that probably means they're trying to save money or focus their resources on the core technology instead of on marketing.
Meanwhile, Apple seems like it's trying to catch up.
Yeah.
They've changed their AI leadership and hired a top person from Google, Amar Subramanya, to speed things up.
It's a direct response. And if you connect the two, you see that even companies with tons of money are having to make really hard choices about where to spend it, all because the cost of the basic infrastructure is just going through the roof.
So it's not just a tech race, it's a strategy problem.
It's an urgent one. They have to figure out their long-term plan right now, or they risk becoming irrelevant.
Okay, so while the companies are battling it out, governments are trying to write the rules for all this new tech. Our next item. The European Union and Singapore have expanded their digital partnership, focusing on AI standards and cybersecurity.
This is really important because it's about cooperation on everything. AI, data, security, semiconductors, you name it. And the key thing is that they are linking the EU's AI framework, which is called ALT EDIC, with Singapore's Sea Lion model.
So this is more than just a friendly chat about rules. They're actually building connections for AI research between Europe and Asia.
Precisely. And so what for businesses is huge. A shared set of rules, especially on safety and data, opens up new research possibilities. And if the regulations are similar, it makes it so much easier for tech companies to operate in both regions. It just removes a lot of the headache.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, that covers the tech side. Let's shift gears now to Section 2 and look at how the big money is moving. This is all about financial restructuring and trying to keep the market stable.
Yeah, we're moving from the risk of new tech failing to the risk of the whole market shaking. And you can see how finance is trying to get more specialized to handle all this uncertainty.
We'll start with a big purchase. Here's the headline. Goldman Sachs is buying Innovator Capital Management for $2 billion to grow its specialized ETF business.
Right, and Innovator is known for something called defined outcome ETFs. Some people call them boomer candy, which is a bit funny. But what they are is products that offer buffered returns.
Buffered returns. What does that mean?
It means you agree to limit how much money you can make if the market goes up. In exchange, the product protects you from losing money if the market goes down. It's a defensive move.
And Goldman Sachs is willing to pay $2 billion for that. Does that mean they think the market is going to get rocky?
It definitely signals a big shift in strategy towards managing risk. When things feel uncertain, investors want guarantees. By buying Innovator, Goldman gets a top spot in selling that kind of protection. It's like they're building a storm shelter before the storm hits.
And this trend of specializing isn't just about new products. We see banks completely changing their business. Next up, Laurentian Bank of Canada is making major changes to become a specialty commercial bank and is selling its retail business.
This is a huge strategic move. Laurentian is getting out of the very competitive, very expensive retail banking world, checking accounts and mortgages for regular people.
And they're focusing just on commercial stuff instead.
Exactly. Things like commercial real estate loans, financing for equipment and inventory, and capital markets. They want to be experts in a few specific areas in Canada and the U.S. rather than trying to do everything.
And other banks are buying up the parts they're selling off.
Yeah.
So is this the future for most banks that aren't, massive global players?
For a lot of them, I think so. It's just too hard for a mid-sized bank to compete with the giant banks and all the new fintech companies in retail. So this move shows a bigger trend. Find what you're really good at, your core business, and focus all your energy there. Dominate a small pond instead of struggling in the ocean.
Okay, so from individual banks to the people who oversee the whole system, the central banks. Our next story is from the UK. The Bank of England's stress tests found that UK banks are strong, so the central bank is relaxing some capital rules.
This is a really strong vote of confidence. The tests showed that the big UK banks could handle a major crisis. And because of that, the Bank of England is easing the rules on what's called Tier 1 capital.
Can you explain Tier 1 capital for us? What is it, and why is it a big deal to lower the requirement?
Of course. Tier 1 capital is the most important measure of a bank's financial health. It's the core money they have set aside to absorb losses without going bankrupt. By lowering the requirement, the Bank of England is saying, we trust you, and it frees up billions that the banks can now lend out to people and businesses. The hope is that it will boost the economy.
But right after they said everything is stable, they gave a pretty serious warning about new risks.
And that's the other half of the message, and it's so important. The Bank of England specifically warned about something called the basis trade.
The basis trade. Sounds complicated.
It is. It's a strategy used by hedge funds. They try to profit from tiny price differences between a UK government bond called a gilt and its futures contract.
So why is the Bank of England worried about something that sounds so specific to hedge funds?
Because of leverage. To make any real money, the funds have to borrow huge amounts, sometimes 50 times their own capital. If the market for those government bonds suddenly gets shaky, all those funds might be forced to sell at once to cover their debts. That could cause a crash.
Ah, a domino effect.
Exactly. The central bank learned from past crises. On one hand, free up money to help the economy grow. On the other, keep a very close eye on these high-risk strategies that could blow up the whole system.
Okay, let's move to our final section. Global economic signals and consumer rules. These are the things kind of slowing the whole system down. First up, the OECD predicts global economic growth will slow down in 2026, mostly because of tariffs and trade problems.
And this is the great irony right now. The OECD is basically saying that all the political friction, the tariffs, the trade barriers, will end up having a bigger negative effect than all the positive boosts we're getting from technology like AI.
So the AI boom is pushing growth up, but politics is pulling it back down. That must be so difficult for big companies trying to plan ahead.
It is, and we have a perfect example of the direct cost. A company like Costco actually sued the last U.S. administration to get a refund on tariffs they paid. That shows you it's not just an idea, it's a real painful cost that eventually gets passed to us, the consumers.
We've talked about risk in the big banks. Now let's look at the more speculative side of things. The headline. Bitcoin's price fell sharply from a high of $91,000 to $84,000, leading a fall across the whole crypto market.
That's a big drop, and it caused a wider sell-off in other digital assets like Ether and Solana. It shows that what we call risk-off sentiment is back.
Meaning investors are getting scared.
Exactly. When the economic future looks uncertain, people pull their money out of high-risk speculative things first. And crypto is definitely in that category for most investors.
And it didn't just affect crypto. We saw the stocks of companies tied to crypto, like Coinbase and Riot platforms, go down as well.
Absolutely. It shows how connected everything is. That kind of volatility often reflects a general anxiety in the market. It ties back to those fears about a potential AI bubble or just a general rethinking of assets that have grown very, very fast.
Now, while all this is going on, the technology itself keeps moving forward. So next up, Samsung has revealed the Galaxy Z Trifold, its first smartphone with multiple folds and a big 10-inch screen.
This is a really interesting step forward in hardware. The multi-fold design means the device can be a normal-sized smartphone, but you can unfold it to be more like a small tablet. It really puts pressure on the competition to innovate with new designs.
So we have that kind of fast innovation happening right next to a huge government intervention in one of the world's biggest markets. Our last story. India will require all new smartphones to have the government's Sanchar Sathi app pre-installed by March 2026, which is raising privacy concerns.
This is a major move. The government says the app is for good reasons: improving cybersecurity, tracking lost or stolen phones, and checking if a phone is authentic. All good goals.
But
But critics are very concerned. Forcing a state-owned app to be pre-installed on every single phone could, they argue, give the government a backdoor to access huge amounts of private user data.
so even if the government says it's just for protection, it's still a massive regulatory step.
It is. It perfectly highlights that global tension we see everywhere: the balance between national security and personal privacy. In a market as enormous as India, a rule like this sets a really important example for how much control a government can have over the technology we use every day.
So after all that, what does it all mean when we put these three big themes together?
Well, we saw the huge amounts of money and effort going into designing the future, right? The NVIDIA deal, the code red at OpenAI.
And we saw the big money getting defensive. The strategic specialization of capital, like Goldman buying protection and Laurentian Bank focusing on a smaller niche.
And finally, we saw the friction, the OECD warning about tariffs, the volatility in crypto, and that clash in India between new hardware and state control.
So you should now have a really solid view of how these global forces are pushing and pulling against each other, speeding things up in one place while creating new roadblocks in another.
For me, the final takeaway is this: we're seeing AI development accelerate at an incredible pace, but at the exact same time, governments and central banks are stepping in more and more.
The Bank of England warning, the EU and Singapore making rules.
And India mandating an app. It's a race for technological dominance happening at the same time as a race to define the rules of the game.
And that leaves a big question for you to think about. As you see these stories develop, consider this. With AI moving so fast and the regulatory response is getting so strong, which force, the centralized regulator or the decentralized innovator, will ultimately have the final say on how quickly and safely these technologies become part of our economy and our daily lives?
That tension is going to define the next decade. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.